What is going on, and welcome back to another video on Conqueror's Blade. So, the new season is out and we have had the new tier 3, the Jangjus, or that's the pronunciation I'm going to go for. I could well be wrong on that one, but correct me in the comments. But anyway, enough about my inability to speak English. Let's take a look at the new tier 3 unit we've had at the season. Are they any good? Are they worth playing? And are they worth unlocking? Well, I'm going to go ahead and say it. They are quite an interesting unit. I'm finding them quite active, quite involved, I guess is the word. Quite micro-intensive. You have to really move them around a lot because they're quite short range on their little throwing knives. I'm finding them fairly fragile. There is 24 in a unit, but they basically have no armour whatsoever. You know, if you breathe on them, they die. And only 8,500 hit points. In the current meta, that's not really a lot. And so they do die really rather easily. But they do have a reasonable damage potential, primarily in their knives. They do have actually good melee capabilities, but because they're so fragile, you know, if you go up against anything that's half decent, Sons of Fenrir, Condos, Prefecture Guards, anything like that, then they're predominantly going to win. Or even if you do manage to somehow carry the day, you'll certainly be dead after it anyway. So, in terms of veterancy lines, there's two possible options. The top line basically goes up to this slow effect that they initiate. I'm never a huge fan of slow effects in Conqueror's Blade. I feel like they don't serve that much of a purpose. There are niche moments when it is useful, and obviously if there's just one unit coming towards you and you can slow them down, it does buy you more time to keep peppering them with knives, and boy do these guys throw knives quickly. So in that sense, I suppose it is useful, but you know, thinking to your own siege battles, how often do you really get into situations where it's you with one unit, with an enemy with one unit, slowly walking towards you? It just doesn't happen that often. Primarily you're getting stuck into fights, there's bigger group fights, etc. And so for me, the bottom line's where I went. Slightly for the extra ammo, but mainly for the bleed that you get with the knives, just to basically up the damage from their knife throws. Because for me, that is kind of what this unit is about. It's not really the melee, it's the knife throwing. So the unit actually gets two abilities. They get a honed edge, I really can't speak today, which is where they basically auto-throw. It's like using auto-throw on a javelin. So they throw at the nearest unit, and then they run at them. They get increased damage and a slight increase to movement speed. It says for a short period, don't know how long that actually is, but yeah, you might as well use it. Got a really short cooldown, like 3 seconds, so I'm continuously peppering this ability while I'm in combat. Throw knives is basically exactly the same ability as honed edge, but it's just an aimed version of it. It allows you to pick where you throw. But the problem is the range is so short, it actually doesn't tell you what the range is, but trust me, it's short, that it's kind of pretty pointless throwing them. Unless there's like a specific range unit you're trying to take out, by and large, it's just not really worth worrying about. But I don't really use these abilities too much, because primarily I'm just using them on auto-throw. So if you put them close enough to an enemy unit because of their short range, then they will auto start throwing knives. And they throw the knives really rather quickly. And that for me is where the bulk of the damage comes from. If you start using the abilities, they'll obviously charge into combat afterwards, and well, I'd rather them hang back and just throw all their knives as quickly as they can, because you're actually getting a reasonable amount of burst damage. It's a little bit like Houndsman, the tier 5 Scottish archer unit in that sense. Hopefully that kind of analogy makes sense. Anyway, what are we running in terms of doctrines? Well, we actually just had the complete doctrine reset. And since I've got, hundreds of doctrines on, I've got 100 units in my barracks, right? So I decided to do a full doctrine reset since they gave us that. And so it gave me access to a few different interesting things. First, slashing AP increase. Nice to give them a little bit more melee damage potential. Then I just went for this nice little epic damage doctrine. I think we got towards the end of the last season, or was it the season before? Which was a bit of a unique doctrine that we got from doing a quest line, and it gave access to slashing damage, piercing damage, blunt damage, which is nice for upping the damage of the knives and their melee damage. And they get a little bit of extra health in it as well, which is never a bad thing. Obviously, extra damage versus heroes, extra damage versus units. They do have a not unreasonable amount of hero killing potential. It's not that the knives themselves are that damaging, but there's 24 of them, and they all throw, a knife a second or something like that. It's really quite quick, so that's why they can kill heroes fairly effectively. And then, of course, a siege fighter doctrine, just to give them that little bit of a leg up. Unit kits should be pretty cheap since it's a seasonal specific unit. They are actually very cheap, 835, so really quite a cheap and easy unit to run. Let's get them topped up while I remember. Anyway, enough waffling from me. Let's hop into some battles with them then. Let's see what we can do and see if it's worth unlocking these knife throwers. So, we kick things off, a little bit of Sun City. I actually quite like this map. Anyway, we're going to push in on the end siege tower. Now, main concern at tier 3, coconut throwers. They'll absolutely destroy this unit, as they destroy, to be honest, most units at tier 3. So really, that's what I'm most concerned about. And this unit is quite fragile. And that's what I mean when I say they can be quite micro-intensive. Anyway, we start to make a push with the team. And I'm holding them at the back. I'm almost using them as a musket unit. And you see, we're picking up kills. And this is the unit standing at the back, just lobbing knives. You can't even see me. I'm doing some sort of knife-throwing animation while sat on my chair. But they just throw loads of knives, up to almost 30 kills. And this is against other tier 3 units. 36 kills, so they are quite effective. Do quite a lot of damage in quite a short period when at close range. We do end up getting a grenade throw coming in. It misses me, but obviously I've got to hang back because if I walk into it, then the unit will set on fire. I do take a loss or two. If the unit gets too close to the front line, sometimes one or two of the models will engage. Anyway, get myself healed up. Team continues to pushing on, so I start pushing up with the rest of the unit. As we come in though, they flank us from the back door. I turn and I basically engage in melee here. So I'm using the knives, getting stuck in. We're getting that damage boost from using the one ability that we used at the start. You can see it's already off cooldown, so I could be using it again here now. And we actually help wipe and push through these prefecture guards. We do take some losses, but we were able to hold them quite well on the corner. And because we're getting the knives in and managed to hold them on the corner and use a bit of hero support, we actually got away with pretty minimal losses. Ultimately, though, we're pretty much out of knives, so I've got to go and send the unit back to the supply point so they can go and get healed up, get some more ammo, and then we can kind of push back in. Unfortunately, the enemy starts to push us harder and actually starts to drive back off the A point a little bit. End up kind of backing off, hoping that Treb's going to land soon to try and hold them up as the sort of enemy Sons of Fenrir start to get in on our archers. Kind of tried to hold things back, end up getting knocked off the ladder. By some miracle, I actually survive. Maybe it's because I landed in a large pile of bodies. But anyway, unit's back at the supply point, getting more ammo, getting healed up. The enemy start to push down a little bit. We see a few of them pushing down, causing a bit of havoc amongst the poor archers. Try and get stuck in, try and assist where I can to try and keep these enemy heroes down. It's probably a little bit too bold of the enemy heroes there, and I call the unit back to me. They do throw knives as they run, which is kind of an interesting point to know. You can see, look, we're running in and they're throwing knives. They don't need to be stationary to throw. So when you're up against just a few units like this, you can basically run towards them and they'll actually be dead before you even get there. So that is kind of quite a cool feature. Okay, so we obviously need to remount and make another push. Put the unit on that side of the siege tower because there could well be coconut throwers on that A point. If you put them on the left of the siege tower and they spot you, they will be able to hit you from there. So that's why I've put them on the other side, just while we assess what's going on, decide if we're making a push, etc, etc. Then as we push up, the team's going, let's go, pushing the unit up. So it's sometimes about just trying to keep them safe while you're deciding what you're going to do. Anyway, we start to push up, team pushes out, we're coming with them, providing some support. And I'm just using them in this sort of knife-throwing capacity. Managed to grab ourselves a hero kill, and I'm just using them, yeah, basically like a musket unit, really. Putting them in close range, pushing them up when needed. But largely trying to avoid melee combat, because they aren't really going to hold up very well. Anyway, I was sort of looking, do we want to push onto A, but I could see these guys coming up the stairs, so that's why I'm trying to sort of hold back. Trying to pin these guys again at the top. You can actually see, look, all the little knives coming in. And we do pick up kills pretty quickly. Some from hero, but a lot just from the knives. We end up sort of getting to a bit of a critical point on the A point, so I do end up pushing the unit in and get stuck into hand-to-hand. Up to 90 kills, but you can see how quickly the unit ends up just getting decimated when you're into a larger sort of group fight. They just are not strong enough to really hold up in these large group engagements. One-on-one in some situations, if you can sort of micro it well, you can win melee. But in these group fights, it just doesn't really seem to pan out. And that's ultimately where we got ourselves killed. But still, managed to get ourselves 90 kills. I think we got a hero kill there along the way. Got a lot of enemy heroes on me here at the moment. Come on, little shields. Hold on. Oh, managed to grab another one. Can we survive this? It seems unlikely. No. Well, moving from offense to a bit of defense, we come over to a little bit of Hidden City. So, currently trying to hold the A point. I was looking to see if they were going to make a push up the far right siege tower, but they don't want to. So we're coming back round and they are starting to push up here. Now this is kind of a little bit what I was talking about at the start with, I find them to be quite micro intensive. I suppose it's almost like having a musket unit right on the front line, because you do have to move them a lot. There's a lot of trebs, a lot of people trying to get onto them, and obviously because you don't want to really engage in melee, then there's a lot of movement. On this map, it's quite easy to predict the trebs. You know, you can see the trebs before they launch because the base will always rotate to where it's going to fire to. So when you see that base rotate, if it's pointing at you, run. And that's what I did just there to avoid that incoming treb. Trying to decide a little bit about which way I want to go. Quite a lot of stuff coming the other way, and really holding A is more important. So I pull back and start to engage the people coming off this tower. Now, I'm a little bit worried about how much stuff was coming in, and we do get another treb coming in which I have to avoid. So I get stuck a little bit in a bottleneck. Now I can kind of see the writing on the wall here. I need to get a little bit out of town. There's no way I'm going to be able to deal with 3 or 4 enemy units coming in frontally. So I've got to sidestep, otherwise I'm basically dead and I won't really contribute anything there. They hold, so I pull back up and just get a little opportunity to throw some knives at them. This unit is just a unit that you can use to be annoying. And then, as they come to engage me, pulling back out the way. That's kind of what I mean by a lot of micro. Got to really pick and choose your fights. So as they engage frontally around there, it provides me an opportunity to get round the back, and we can pepper them with some knives. And as it starts to become a fight that we're clearly going to win, you can then throw our weight in on a little bit of melee. And fine, you know, the unit does do a lot of damage. It's just that they're very fragile. That's what I always mean when I'm trying to largely avoid melee fights with them. If you're going to win, if it's a fairly easy fight, then it's fine to use the melee, because as I say, they are actually quite damaging. It's just that they're a little bit fragile. Anyway, I send the unit back to the supply point because they're basically out of ammo. Gives you a little bit of an idea of how long the knives actually last. We slightly bully this poor little maul player, and on the floor, and he's dead. So the unit gets its ammo back, and I'm pulling them back up because we're starting to be pressured again off this siege tower, and we need to be getting back up and getting stuck back into the fight. And so you can see what I mean when you're sort of trying to move them a lot, avoiding the trebs, trying to keep the knives in play. And a lot of the time, you're not getting huge kills. You know, I've not had any great real games here at the moment. Most of my time has just been spent trying to keep the unit out of trouble. We've only got 20 kills or so. And I suppose that's kind of one of the drawbacks of the unit. Because of the lack of melee, or I suppose more their weakness in combat, then that's, you kind of spend a lot of the time just trying to sort of micro them, rather than actually sort of necessarily getting stuck into combat. Pull back from the Sons of Fenrir again. Sons of Fenrir absolutely wreck this unit. And of course they do get an element of range resistance when they've got Predator mode on. So I'm trying to sort of keep them out of trouble. End up getting knocked down a little bit by some of the musket, taking a little bit of fire. Do end up getting stuck into a bit of combat, and I decide that it's probably a good time to send the unit back to heal up. Try and cover the retreat from the Sons of Fenrir on the corner. And they actually start to push us quite hard on this corner. So I decide, right, let's not go to supply because they're going to start to push us quite hard here. Let's pull the unit back up, sit at the bottom a little bit, and we can try and get some damage on them through knife throwing as they start to push and sort of crest the ridge of the stairs. We get a little bit of friendly support turning back up, so we start to pressure the situation a little bit more, hoping to try and push them back up. Come to the top of the stairs where we can start to get knife throws in again. But essentially we end up starting to get into a bit of a combat situation whether we really mean to or not. So decide, screw it, let's go on, let's get stuck in. Go in with my 1 ability, and you see that cooldown is really short, so we can keep activating that. And we unfortunately then get hit by trebs. And even though we do manage to get quite a few kills with them in melee, ultimately it basically spells the end of the unit. Got us up to about 50 kills with them. And that's kind of how most of my games, I find, tend to end up going. Because you sort of can use them a bit, but ultimately you end up getting sucked into a melee for a fight at a critical time. And then you can actually do damage in those fights, but it kind of spells the end of the unit a little bit. So, is the unit worth unlocking? I guess that's kind of the question we want to get to. I'd say the answer is in 2 parts. I think now, at the start of the season, in Tier 3, yes, it's not a dominant unit. It's by no means going to be putting you top of the table, but it is quite a fun unit for one. It is decent. I think it's actually pretty well balanced. It can do damage, it can be effective, but it's equally nothing crazy. I think where it's going to start to struggle is once it gets to tier 4 and 5 units. It works at tier 3 because the knives do damage. Because of the right level of armor penetration, units aren't that strong. There's a lot of pike units and stuff without shields to damage. once you get onto tier 4, and particularly tier 5, the level of damage that you do with the pikes is severely reduced. And so it's really going to lose a lot of its effectiveness, and then I think it's going to start being a unit that isn't really very effective, particularly when you compare it to something like Sons of Fenrir, the Coconut Throwers, which still do work and are still viable at tiers 4 and 5. So hopefully that kind of a reasonable answer. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. If you have, do let me know what you think in the comments down below, and of course subscribe to the channel for lots more Conquerors Blade content. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you all on the next one.